social innovation is such a powerful tool for social change that is needed now more than ever.
Cheryl, before we dive into some of the topics that I'd really like to cover with you, can we just step back? You've had such an interesting career, and I know it's taken a lot of turns. Can you talk a little bit about your journey and when you had that aha moment that you recognized you could potentially have a greater impact on the many issues that you obviously care deeply about?
When I was in medical school, there was a seminal 5-part series in the Boston Globe, which is that city's paper of record, called Birth in the Death Zones. And it looked at Boston's disproportionately high infant mortality rate. Back in the 80s, Black babies were dying at 3 times the rate of white babies, which is atrocious and inequitable enough. The fact that it was happening in the backyard in the shadow of the world's greatest medical facilities was really quite unnerving. So, I remember reading that series and seeing sort of the picture of a young Black mother kneeling before the grave of the baby she had just buried. And it was really sort of a searing image that I still see today. And it still really makes me tear up because, that could have been my sister or my cousin or my, aunt or me. And sort of that responsibility, that moment of obligation when you say, that's wrong. And either you say it's wrong and duly noted, or it's wrong and shouldn't I do something about it? And I think for me, that was my moment of obligation of this one I can't turn away from. This is where I've got to put my shoulder to the wheel and lean in, which led me to the work I did in co-founding a mobile health unit in inner city Boston, led me fully into social change work, and where I sit today running an organization that is investing in next generation leaders who never turn away from the problems in their community.
I think about what you've just described, the specificity of your experience, and then I look at the program that you've constructed at Echoing Green, and I look at the areas that you focus on, racial equity, climate change, poverty, public health. Can you just talk about the sort of this macro vision you have of global issues and also this very specific intersection and focus that you've also just described?
One of the central animating factors that has made Echoing Green, I think, different and unique relative to other players in social innovation are a couple of things. Number one, our real focus on proximate leaders, on leaders of color, sort of this importance, the import of sort of community-led solutions as a way of sort of bubbling up and percolating up solutions that work for more folks in community. And then secondly, as you said, Deborah, the intersectionality of all of this. I think we as a community understand that, the role of race, the role of gender, the role of class in all of these complex problems are so central and essential that you cannot get closer to solving them unless you interrogate and take on those structural factors. You just have to do it. And I think in many ways, sort of the leadership set, the leadership qualities that our social entrepreneurs bring to bear is a really trenchant analysis of the interconnection of all of these things.
So can you talk about specifically, since it's such a multifaceted solution that's always required, what the entrepreneurs, the social entrepreneurs are bringing to solving these issues?
I think social innovation provides a new set of tools, weapons, if you will, to bring to bear on the fight for social change for a host of reasons. So number one, sort of the entrepreneurial mindset is a disruptive one. It has a built-in critique of the status quo, and in many ways, a lack of respect for the way things have always been done. So when you're trying to unpack these really entrenched structural issues, no better approach than an entrepreneurial frame. I think also we've seen in sort of the urgency, sort of speed and facility of entrepreneurship around growth and scale, the ability to leapfrog is ever present in the entrepreneurial model. You absolutely need that when you're trying to take on these big systems that are so sclerotic and difficult to penetrate.
So I'm curious, for people who are listening, watching you today, what advice would you have, or what, if somebody who isn't in our space or your space or isn't about to start a new company but wants to do something, what would you recommend?
And we had an exercise that we called the 10 by 10 by 10 exercise, which I still love, Deborah. And it basically broke down sort of maybe this overwhelming concept of, oh my gosh, the world is so complicated. What can I do? Into here's what you can do. So it was, what can you do in the next 10 days to think about your role as a citizen differently? What are you going to do in the next 10 weeks to think about your role as a citizen differently? And then in the next 10 months. So I would say in 10 days, in this moment of racial unrest, spend the next 10 days reading something new and just broadening your aperture and your horizon. Read White Fragility. Read Dr. Kennedy's book, How to Be an Anti-Racist. Read Nicole Hannah-Jones of the New York Times, her remarkable series called 1619. And in fact, new article she just put out in the Times Magazine on what is O. Just start reading. You can do that in 10 days. We can all do that. 10 weeks, maybe look in your neighborhood or think about an issue that you care a lot about and say, I think I want to do something about that. And maybe in 10 months, make a commitment to get more involved and use your smarts, your capability to join the board of one of these organizations that you care about. Because believe me, you could have a real opportunity to fundamentally transform the work of that organization and the leader at the helm by just providing your time, talent, and treasure. It all matters a lot.
I love that. I would really underscore the first, second, and third, 10, 10, 10. And I think I'm going to probably pause on that note on my side. I'd love to just ask you, though, is there anything we haven't spoken about or talked about that this is triggered or that's on your mind that you just would like to mention before we wrap up our conversation?
No, thank you for that opportunity, Deborah. We're all asking the question, either quietly or out loud, is this moment different? Have we essentially seen what I call sort of a crack in the universe? And I will say that I am cautiously optimistic that in this moment, with this unbelievable confluence of factors, we have the potential as a society to step back, assess so many structures and systems that have worked for far too few, and not only think about immediate response in this very difficult moment, but actually a fundamental reimagining of how these systems and structures could work better for all of us. And I think that's, what a moment for creativity and, in fact, artistry around what a better world could look like. And it feels to me that if enough of us raise our hand and say that we're ready for this transformative moment and are ready to roll up our sleeves and be part of that creation, there could really be much better days ahead.
Well, thank you. I love that hopeful note, and I look forward to our continued partnership. And thank you for the time that you spend really on behalf of all of us for fighting the good fight.
Deborah, thank you. A pleasure and honor as well.